12, no? We have time as in our agenda is not too tight. We have a buffer time of 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. So maybe we can wait a couple of ones for the beginning. There was food downstairs, right?
Yes, yes. That's why it's the food. That's why
So
it's going to take a while.
yeah, very hard to compete.
It's off, right? Or it's on?
It's back on.
You should switch it off. This is not working, right?
I don't know.
I've not seen anybody use it.
You need to plug it in your, yeah.
No, no, no. But anyway, this should not work because this is, we're not doing screen share. We are doing the slide share from Meeteco. So on Meeteco, I don't think this will work.
Meeteco doesn't support it.
We can always do that thing.
You need really to click the buttons. There is no the keyboard. The keyboard. Okay.
Maybe we can announce that we'll start in 5 minutes.
Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, John. We propose to wait for a couple more minutes. There are beverage downstairs, so for people on Mexico, don't panic. The PC walking group session will start, but just wait for people to join the room. Maybe you should remove that. Speak.
I saw your email about like we take that operational thing and split it. So it makes a lot of sense to me. It's certainly easier to progress, I think, if we've had a couple documents recently at telechat that sort of like combine like a bunch of other stuff and like a little bit of standards track stuff, and like it's totally possible to progress a document like that, but it's easier, right? Easier to like pull out the standards track and stick it in one place, take all the informational stuff, stick it in another place, and go. So as far as I'm concerned,
Yeah.
that sounds good. I can follow up on all that.
Yeah.
We're planning to talk about it.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. It's on the agenda.
I might say something else.
Thanks.
Thank you, John. Usual suspects.
I think you can start.
Okay. Thanks. Hello again, everyone. We propose to start. This is the past competition element working group session. So as you may be aware, November 11 is a special day for many countries. So in the UK, it's quite significant. So just as a reminder for people involved at war, it was nice to mention the specific date. Okay, back to IETF business. The usual not well, you should be all familiar with them, especially we're on Friday already. So usual IPR request on IETF processes from the IETF, and you should get down to those reference if you aren't already aware of them. Next. Okay, mixed meeting again. People are joining both from the room on Meteco. So we use the Meteco tool to manage the queues. So that's the main impact for people on site. Remember to join the queue using the Meteco tool. There is a light one that is appropriate for mobile phones or laptops. And for remote participants, you know the deal. You're already using the Meteco app, whatever. Thanks. Next. The usual pointers that you may be aware of. There is no one on the minutes there. It's after.
It's later.
Yeah, later. Yeah. The guideline for conduct. Nothing new there, but it's always useful to remind them. So we have Harry acting as a minute taker, but as usual, if you want to give him a hand, it's always useful, especially if you were involved in discussion. For people on site, name spelling, checking could be useful. So you may join the minutes on the link there and give Harry a hand when you feel like it. Thanks. Usual reminder on the process in the IETF, especially on the use of the mailing list. We know that from time to time there are many things happening in the background. So let's remind that the IETF process is based on touching consensus to progress work. So this needs to be visible at some point on the mailing list. There are also some critical steps on the IETF process related to the mailing list use. So when it comes to working group last calls, document adoption, and so on, the more people are involved, the easier it is for the chairs to judge on the consensus on the support of a given work item. We also manage a wiki, especially to keep an eye on the existing queue for document adoption on working group last calls. There's still some backlog there, but it's improving. So feel free to update in case we missed any item there. The chat that you may access directly from that link or also using the medical tool is already up and running. And in case you need some implementation with interop on, there are some opportunities to request early code points from the IANA. So it's been used in the past for a few drafts, and please don't forget to go through that process in case there are interoperability at stake in the short term, because it's easier to get early code point than modify existing deployment later in the process. So you don't necessarily have to wait for the full RFC status to use that code point from the IANA. The agenda, no change from the published one. Anyone want to bash anything? Hope not. Okay, so let's move on. Early reviews. So as you may be aware, there has been some suggested process about early reviews in the routing area. The good news is that from the PC standpoint, we regularly use the early review process from time to time. So nothing brand new from the PC perspective, but it's good to see that it's a generic guideline that we are already following and that that is enlarging. We feel it's a very useful process step to consider early reviews from the routing area perspective. As you may know, we usually get interesting feedback from the reviewers. So it's good to see this process with an enlarged scope, and we will keep on using that good step or way of conduct. In case, yeah, document shepherding to balance the work and help the chairs flush the queues. Using Shepherd for the last stage of the document is a useful way. So if you're interested, please contact the chairs. We'd be happy to discuss with you what document would be relevant for you to shepherd. That's a useful way for the shepherd to understand the IETF process, especially in the last stages. And for the chair to balance the work, we thank Harry, who's been already taking some of them as a shepherd. And if there are other people happy to join our PC usual shepherd, that would be great from the chair perspective. So, working group status. We have no new RFC since the last IETF meeting, but the work has still been progressing quite well. Three of the documents are in the RFC editor queue. One of them has been blocked for a while, pending for a spring document. Segment routing document, which is work in progress. So we hope to resolve that dependency in a short term or reasonable term. The other ones are progressing, so we can hope that by the next IETF meeting, we will have several RFCs published. We have two other documents in the IESG hand. So it seems a regular level of queues in a working group which is alive and which has a document progressing towards RT status. Apart from that, we have a recent lesion that came from the ITUT, so we need to join the routing area effort there to update the list of relevant documents that we will point to the ITUT when responding to their liaisons. So it's a usual communication between the SDO. So nothing special to mention there. If you feel there would be something to point out specifically related to a given work, please contact the chairs. Otherwise, we will probably just send an updated list of relevant documents for them. We also have a reminder of the existing Heli code point allocation from the IANA there with the deadlines. So everything in 2024 for the next steps. Some have been renewed, some are progressing to RSCs. So everything's fine so far at this stage for code point allocation. Okay, so I'll leave the floor to my co-chair.
Hi, everyone. We'll now talk about all the working group documents. Just a reminder, in our agenda, we had only one working group document whose status is being presented, but working group documents are very important. This is where we have the consensus to progress the work. So please use this time if there is any open issue that you have with these documents, or if there is any feedback that you want to provide to the working group. This is the key work that we want to progress as part of our working group activities. And that's why I have put a little bit time on the agenda for all our working group documents as well. So let's start with the first one. I am a co-author, and Julian is shepherding the document. The document is currently still in the working group last call stage. It has not been closed. We got comments from Tom Petch, especially related to the use of TLS 1.3. And there is a document today on the agenda which talks about how PCEP can use TLS 1.3, as well as from the Yang point of view, it also has a slide there where how we have already handled the comment that came from Tom. And then once that is done, most likely I'll ask my co-chair to progress the document to the next step. As far as update is concerned, apart from TLS 1.3 issue, the main changes was we had a new RFC for flow spec capability. So that capability flag was missing. So that got added. And related to security, also in the IGP, we had a recent document that went through IGP. There also, based on the comments in the ops section, some things was pointing out, which we have updated in the Yang model as well. So everything is well aligned. And we hope that this document, which is a very important document for PSEP, this is the base Yang model for us, would soon see publication. Is there any comments? Please use this time, people in the room or online. If you have any thoughts, we have some time for discussion on any of these documents. I encourage you to come to the mic. So this is the document on which the binding set is waiting. This is uh, our SRV6 document. Uh, the authors have made an update. There was also a comment from Mridmoy regarding some error codes that were misaligned between SRMPLS and SRV6. And authors did a pass for not just that error code, but all the error codes. And I think in the latest update, they have handled this well. So please review. And we need to progress this document next because as we just talked about it, that it's blocking one of the documents in RFC editor queue, as well as this document has INA allocation, which is going to expire, though we can, of course, ask for renew. No, this one, I think maybe we cannot ask for renew. It's like two things already done. So we should progress this and get it out in the normal process. Of course, we can ask AD's permission, but let's try to do what we promised to the working group. And if anybody has any concerns, please let us know. Uh, the other set of documents, which are almost nearing working group last call, we have a document related to native IP. This RFC, the corresponding RFC is already published in T's working group. There was, uh, it has things related to BGP, and John in past ITF pointed out to the IDR mailing list. It got discussed in the IDR mailing list. IDR chairs gave some comments, which authors have also handled. So I think we have done our due diligence and we are ready to send this document and do working group last call. And of course, notify IDR about working group last call as well. So we will do that soon. The other document that is nearing working group last call is FlexGrid. This one has been refreshed. We haven't received many comments. The authors haven't made any big changes. Looks to be okay, but if you have any concerns, please use this time and let us know. Otherwise, we will be progressing this work soon. This one, which is enhanced error, this is one which we are kind of stuck. We presented the same slide in the last 1114 meeting, and I'm have to repeat the same slide again in 115. We have no inputs. The document is still not being used by other things, which is also giving a signal that we could see what to do. But again, this is your opportunity. Let us know if you have any thoughts regarding progressing of this document, both to the authors as well as to the working group. And we will be making a decision very, very soon. So rest of the working group IDs. We have path segment document. This has been updated, mainly editorial change. Uh, we asked an explicit question in 114 that currently this document has two ways of doing the same thing. It uses PCCC mechanism as well as using the TLV. We have done that in the past. It's still aligned, but we wanted to give the opportunity to the working group to make sure that they are aware that there are two mechanisms being standardized. And if there is an issue, please voice it out now. Otherwise, the author's preference is to use both the mechanisms, and they have justified that in the document as well. So please review and give your feedback. That's the only issue. Otherwise, I think path segment in Spring is progressing quite well. So we should be doing that in PC as well and publishing this soon. Similar document is about bidirectional path. Again, mainly editorial changes. Looks to be pretty stable. Has similar work is already done. Uh, so we will be progressing that soon. So I think we have a question. Ahmed, go ahead. Oh, looks like it was by mistake. So let's continue. Then we have documents related to SR policy candidate path. This has been mainly a refresh from our look. It seems to be ready. Like we haven't had a major update in a while. It was presented in the past ITF, has good support. So we will be putting this into almost ready for working group last call queue. So if people have any thoughts, comments, implementers, please give your feedback on this document soon. The second one is PCCC-SR. Again, no major update. Looks like nearing working group last call. If you have an issue, please let us know. So with the idea of presenting the statuses, we just want to know what our thinking is. So gives the working group an opportunity also to align and review and give feedback timely rather than at the wait for the working group last call only. Better to do handle comments as a part of working group process itself. Multipath has not seen an update, but it is being used. Uh, it has been implemented. The multiple vendors claim to implement this, so which is good. So we would like to progress this as well soon. State synchronization not have been has not been updated. One issue which it might be a personal issue that I have is that document doesn't talk about how to set primary and secondary. It says it's out of scope, but anybody who's implementing it would have to have some knobs. So I wanted to make sure that people are okay with it to not keep that as a part of the document and keep this out of scope. If you disagree, please use our mailing list and let's discuss this. The next set of documents are PC optional, no update, looks to be ready. Uh, we have, uh, if anybody has any objection, please use the mailing list. We have a document, stateful interdomain. It has expired. It has not been updated, but the authors have told that they plan to make an update soon. And also they plan to handle the comment related to enhanced error, which I was earlier talking about, that whether this document can use the extension uh, that is suggested in the enhanced error for stateful interdomain. There was a document in the Spring Working Group as well, which was talking about interdomain. Currently, they focus only on a single PCE case. I did bring it up that if they want to handle multiple PCE, this will be the approach of stateful interdomain that they can explore. So that is also something worth checking across working group as well. With respect to SR-P2M policy, there has been no update, but this is one of the recent adopted working group documents. So let's give it time for people to adjust and implement, etc. L2 flow spec. This was the document that was moved out of the original flow spec document, mainly because of IDR flow spec V2 work. It is basically pending the flow spec V2 work to happen in IDR, as well as the L2 flow spec being published in IDR. Once those two are done in the IDR working group, then I think PSEP work can also progress. So right now we are on the waiting stage as far as the L2 flow spec document is concerned. The SID algo was adopted, I think, 2 IETFs ago. Currently, it's in the expired state, so it's a 00 draft that's been expired. There are even pending comments from the working group adoption stage. So I really request authors to refresh this work. Like there is all this energy during adoption, but after adoption, authors kind of forget about the work. So that should not happen. Please refresh your work. Please keep it updated. Please handle the comments that you receive during adoption process. Just a reminder to everyone. And some recent documents, we had PSEP path MTU. When we adopted this work, we pointed out that there should be a work in Spring that should coordinate this, that should define what path MTU is in SR policy context, and both IDR document and PSEP document should refer to that. The new ID has been published in Spring. It's been presented twice now. Hopefully it will get adopted there as well. And then the dependencies will also be clear and we can progress the work in PSEP as well. We have a document IFIT, which is anyway on the agenda, so I will leave it out for the actual presentation. Uh, a recent adopted document, we have SRV6 Yang, which is adopted. It is, of course, being dependent on our PSEP Yang, so let's publish that and then we can make progress. Good thing is that it's been updated and the alignment work between PSEP Yang and SRV6 Yang as ongoing. One thing to note is the document is called SRV6 Yang, but it has SR policy as well as SRV6. stuff. So please take a note of it, that the document name may not actually reflect what it actually, it contains both the things. So please be aware of that. We have a working group adoption call queue. Uh, uh, it's in the wiki. Please give us feedback if you have a need for instance, you are implementing it and you need code points and you want to uh, fast track something, your chairs are listening, please reach out. We try to keep our wiki up to date so that you have visibility on where the queues are, what's the priority that we are thinking. So please use our wiki as well. So we have two discussions, the key discussions that happened between the meeting, and we wanted to just highlight that in the working group session as well and give people time if they want to talk about it further. There was a proposal for how to enable BFD. There were multiple suggestions, whether we use association, whether we use some other mechanism, but all those things are currently still only on the mailing list. So I have sent a personal message also to the authors that let's bring the work into IETF by writing your first internet draft so that we can follow IETF process and give comments rather than exchanging Word documents and doing this. That's not how we do work in IETF. So I'm waiting for the internet draft to be published and then we can move work forward. The second discussion that was happening was with respect to PC operational draft. This was presented in the last meeting and we did discuss what should be the next step, whether we should break the document into two, have a very clear standards track document which clearly says what needs to be updated, and have a much more bigger clarification document that talks about uh, how to apply PC in various different stateful PC in various different scenarios, give clear description. This has been discussed. We started a thread. Thread kind of mellowed down. I did respond yesterday. We got one more response, and I see now John wants to say something as well. So the queue is open.
Thanks, John Scudder. Excuse me. Yeah, so I saw your comment and thanks for teeing this up. And went and just very quickly glanced through the current state of the draft. I we can speaking, in terms of like sort of progressing it through the IESG, we can do it either way, as one unified draft or as two separate drafts as you proposed, Roof. But I will say that I think it will go more smoothly. I mean, often I would prefer to have one draft just to progress fewer documents, but I think it will actually go more smoothly to have one tiny standards track document that's very crisp and clear, and one informational document that can provide as much color, commentary, and detail as the working group deems necessary. So just from sort of my selfish perspective of wanting to have an easier time of being able to move it through the IESG, I would encourage the working group to consider the two document option. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Anyone? No. Let's move on. Uh, this is again in our wiki, a page that we created mainly focusing on coordination with other working group and research groups. So again, wiki is open to everyone. It's not just for chairs and secretaries to maintain, it's for the whole working group. So when we have any work that you are similarly doing in some other working group where the coordination is needed, please come and keep this wiki up to date. For instance, we have a lot of work coming from Beer, from DetNet, from various different things. We want to coordinate as much as possible, because as you know, we have noted problem later in this thing where IDR does the same thing but in a different way and we miss out something in PC. So we want to avoid those things going forward. So one of the steps that we thought that we could do this coordination visibility much more much more better by using our wiki. So please keep them up to date. I have put many documents list already, but I would prefer if authors do that and they have the best visibility. So please use this. So I just want to send a reminder there. Thank you. And that's it. Any last thoughts from anyone on any of the working group documents? Otherwise, we'll go to the agenda. No? Sean?
It's very odd. This microphone is at the right height almost. Thank you very much. Get away from everybody. Hey, so Russ Housley and myself were writing this draft in NetConf, and we said, hey, what are we going to do about TLS 1.3 and the use of NetConf? And it's got some dragons. And Drev rightly noticed that maybe this draft pretty much equally applied here. So he was like, hey, what about this draft? So we pretty much said, hey, how do we get together and do this draft together? So we took the text, tweaked it like very slightly, and over here. So next. So basically, the motivation is that 8253 defines how to protect PCAP with TLS 1.2 and with 1.3. You need to say something as well. You can't just say next version because there's this little tweak that we've defined called zero RTT. And with zero RTT, there's some dragons because this particular mode of using TLS, the flight of messages includes some um, badness. So it's replayable, and you have to make sure that you have the ability to like protect against that. And depending on your protocol, you also don't need it. So the idea that you can essentially profile a particular version of the protocol, you can do that. So that's what this draft is all about. So the idea is to basically be explicit about the protocol profile. Um, and it's really about like mostly it's like don't use this particular mode and otherwise just basically be exactly like the other version. Next. So early data is really simple again. So the idea is that like if you've connected to a site before, when the next time you talk to them, you don't have to worry about re-authenticating. You can just use this pre-shared key that's been given back. But if you don't do a lot of that, you don't need it. So don't do it. So if you send this particular flight of messages, you can send it quicker. But don't bother if you don't need it a lot. So that's really what it is. If you don't have a lot of reconnection options, or you don't use it that way, just don't use it. So because you don't have to worry about it. Because to set it up, you essentially have to like do a lot of replay protection. And it's not needed. So um, and the comments during the discussion of the working group was actually really interesting because Tom was like, hey, you don't need this. And he said a lot of very strong things, which I don't agree with everything he said, but I was kind of like, all right, he's kind of right. At the end of the day, it basically said like, hey, if you're going to run this, if you're going to run TLS 1.3, you could do it. You just don't need it. So actually, we ported the comments from this working group adoption back into NetConf, and the NetConf working group was like, okay, that's great. Well, let's take those words. So at the end of the day, the drafts are actually aligned already, and the work that's in NetConf is actually going to go out for working group last call very shortly. So it's kind of a great way that it worked out. So yeah, next. And then Cypher suites. So they're slightly different. In the way that you actually specify the Cypher suites, you specify less, which is okay because the actual mandatory to implement Cypher suites went from like a long list to like 4. And so we picked less, and that's better because it's, the ones that were picked by the overall IETF are better, but there's less to pick from, and that's in some respects better because that means people concentrate on the ones that you're picking, and so go with those. And there's this little option about forward security, which people may or may not care. So the idea is that if the forward security is that if you are able to capture a connection or a sequence of flights of messages, and then later on break it, you can't later go back and break it. So it's good that you're able to ensure that the things that were done in the future are all right. So at the end of the day, the protocol is better. It's more provably secure. And that's next. Yep. So the Yang module. I don't know if I want to hand over now.
Sure.
Let's do that. Okay.
Just one slide. Since I'm the author for the PCEP Yang, let me just explain what we did here. So basically, we use the netcon document, which has all the groupings related to how we configure TLS client and TLS server. And that grouping basically says we can configure any version of TLS, but we are going to recommend that you use TLS 1.3. And we know that in PCEP, there are still implementations that are currently using TLS 1.2. We want our Yang model to be able to be used in those scenarios as well. And we just want to clarify in our document that yes, it is still possible to do that. You have a feature, TLS 1.2, that can still be enabled, even though the Yang model says it's not recommended, but that doesn't mean that it cannot be used. So we added this description, a specific section on how to use, how to handle this TLS version issue in our PCEP Yang. And hopefully via this update, we handled the comment that Tom pointed out during the working group last call of Yang. So this was pretty good conversation, led to a new document as well as clarification. Hopefully that would help people who are implementing and using our Yang model in future. Thank you.
So I'll stand up here for like one more minute while people want to ask me questions. And if not, I'll sit down.
Thank you. So I don't see anyone queuing. So I believe that this is a straightforward draft on. This is very great that it shows up already while reviewing some existing PCE documents. So it's good to catch up with the security level of the IETF. As a result, I'd be happy to see a show of hands for the abduction of the document and the progress of this work. So if you agree on support this item, raise your hand. If you oppose, don't raise your hand. And ideally, if you don't care, just don't respond. Let's give a couple of tens of seconds. I see 100% support so far, which is great. In any case, it will be resumed as a mailing list question. So it is, yeah, a great idea. No one opposed. Okay. So thank you for responding. I think we can end it right now. It gives a clear trend. So we will send a question to the mailing list about the adoption of this important document. Thank you, Sean. So the next presenter is Wemo, who's coming to the mic.
Hi everyone, I'm Huaimo from FutureWay. Today I'm going to talk about PCE for mirror binding. Next page. PCE has been extended to distribute the SR paths to network nodes. That SR path may contain binding. So binding here means a binding seed plus or associated with a list of seeds. That list of seeds is for another path segments. So when a path contains a binding seed, PCE will send that binding, which is contains binding seed plus list of seeds to the node. For example, here we have a path from P1 to P1 to node N, and then to node P3, P6, and then to P4. So basically, this SR path contains blue segments and green segments, and then blue segments. Those green segments are indicated by binding, which means that PCE will send the binding to node N. So that binding will contain a binding seed, B seed, plus the seed list here, which is S1 and S2. So when node n receive a package with a binding seed, node n will replace that binding seed with that list of seeds, which here is node n will replace binding seed with S1 and S2. So S1, S2 determines that green path segment. So node n will send a package along that green path segment, and then the package will send along the path green path segment and then blue segment to the destination PE4. So here, when a SR path contains a binding, PCE will send that binding to node n. So in order to provide protection for the failure of node n with binding seed, PCE will be extended to send the binding information plus the node ID of node n to the adjacent node of node n. So with this information, the adjacent node of node n can provide protection for the failure of node n regarding to the binding seed. So for example, when node n fails, node P1 will detect the failure of node n. Node P1 will pop up the seed for node n because node n is already gone, it's failed. And then, but for the binding seed on node n, P1 will just acting as a proxy for node n, replace that binding seed with the list of seed, for example, S1 and S2, and then send the package along the S1 as S2, for example, to P3, and then P3 will send the package along the green path until destination. Here, in the last, Andrew Stone raised some questions regarding this one. So first the question is that, so for the adjacent node, so that node need to figure out something. For example, if a segment list, for example, S1, S2 here is adjacent seed. So in this case, because adjacent seed is local, so P1 need to do something. So in this case, if segment list for binding contains the adjacent seed, basically the first one, which we just consider, we just care about the first seed, whether it's an adjacent seed. So here we assume S1 is the adjacent seed. In this case, P1 will figure out the remote node of that adjacent seed. Here, so P1 will figure out through the adjacent seed to get the remote node ID or remote node seeds, which is P3. And then P1 will replace the binding seed with the node seed of P3, and then forward the package to P3. And then P3 will use whatever is whether it's the adjacent seed or node seed of S2, and then send the package along the path, along the green path segment, and then to the destination. So that's one question raised by Andrew Stone, and then I just answer here. Do you have any questions for regarding to this part? Yeah, here, here. Good, good.
Yeah, so I saw your reply this morning. Thank you for that. I think I've got a few comments on just the general solution. So what you commented on, yeah, totally agree. It makes sense in that situation.
Good. Thank you, thank you.
I think though it creates an assumption that P1 in this situation actually has the capability of pushing the node SID to reach, in this case, for example, P3, as well as the remaining SIDs that are in the stack being provided by the binding SID. So imagine if your binding SID is instructed with 5 labels or 5 SRv6 labels. The assumption is now P1 can do 4 plus 1 to work around that, or 3 plus 1 to work around that. So I think that kind of creates an implied assumption that the neighboring node has the sufficient hardware capability to push all of those labels of the path. And so I think this brings probably a more fundamental question of, if we're trying to protect N and the binding SID, do we still want to route along the complete path that the binding SID has taken? Or do we want to reroute where the binding SID terminates? Because you've got those label imposition on that neighboring node. And so it could be possible that your neighboring node that you're transiting through, in P1 in this case, actually can't carry all of that traffic that the binding SID is providing, which is why the binding SID exists in the first place. So it kind of leads then into, I think, another open question of, or another open challenge, is that the assumption is P1 can resolve where N is going to go, right? So the local adjacency SID, I agree with you. If it's an IGP adjacency SID, it can figure it out from the IGP information. But if it's in a different domain, it can't. If it's a EPE SID, it can't. In the future, there could be other segment IDs where that local P1 can't know what is the neighbor beyond. So I think it raises the question of, should PCE actually tell P1 what SID or stack of SIDs it should use to actually protect that node SID? Or sorry, protect that binding SID. So for example, instead of telling P1, here is a binding SID of your neighbor, here is the path of the binding SID, instead, here is the binding SID, here is a list of SIDs that you shall use to protect that binding SID.
Yeah,
And-
that's a good question. Yeah,
and-
so right now we assume that IGP will distribute those kind of adjacent seed, and then the P1 figure out that one. And so you imply that maybe PCE can do something. If the binding segment is contain the adjacent seed, and then PCE may just figure out the node seed of P3, right? Send that node seed to P1, and then P1 can make P1's work easy, right? Is that your comments?
Yeah, and it
Yeah,
handles, and it
yeah,
handles
I agree.
and it
Yeah.
handles other situations, especially with multi-domain or PCE-CC, and just situations where P1 doesn't know where that SID's going to go. And it opens up the door for PCE to decide, like as I mentioned, instead of rerouting to the next node, you can reroute somewhere downstream, which can even be traffic engineered, right? Or other binding SIDs. It opens up a lot more flexibility. And I think after reading the email this morning, and I'm still planning to reply to it, and then come into this working group, I think the solution of protecting the node that's carrying a binding SID, I'm worried that we might be repeating different descriptions in both PC and IDR. And so I'm wondering if the solution should be taken out into, let's say, routing working group or even Spring, and then worry about the encoding after the fact. Because the encoding between BGP and PSEP, there's going to be very similar situations. It's just, how do you actually want to solve the problem? And I think in our discussions right now, I think there's a few different ways to solve it. And I think there needs to be some consistency on how we want to solve it.
Yeah, in fact, this is we have a protection draft in Spring, and then Spring Child suppose I think in order to provide protection for node failure with binding seed, and then we need a PCE or IGP IDR extension. That's why we come here.
Yep.
We already have a draft for protecting the binding seed in Spring Group.
Okay.
And then we need support from the other protocol extensions.
Okay.
Such as PCE.
I might have missed that. I'll take a look for that. But I think clarifying exactly how we want to protect it and then deal with the encodings after. Because there's some weird quirks here, especially when you start talking about multi-area, multi-domain, different types of SIDs. If it was just node SIDs in the stack, and if P1 had enough hardware capacity, yeah, it's not a big deal, but unfortunately, that's not the reality sometimes. So anyways, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comments and suggestions. I think this is for the, as Angel mentioned, that this is, so for the node N is within the domain is easy. So if that node N is a border node, yeah, that case is even tougher, because border node and then the previous hop, the upstream node, do not know the path segment, because that binding segment is in another domain. So in that case, so we needed to have egress protection, because that node n is an egress node. So we need to have a backup egress node to be assigned to protect the node n. And then we have those kind of, that's regarding your third question. So if node n is a border node, and then the border node, we have a backup border node, and then in that case, and then backup border nodes know the information about another domain with same information as node n.
I think it's probably debatable whether or not it's considered an egress node because it's still an end-to-end tunnel, and the binding SID is still part of that end-to-end packet, that end-to-end path. There's no de-encapsulation at that point. So at that point, when it's leaving, a domain, it's still part of that tunnel. So it's not necessarily egressing the tunnel. It's just egressing the domain or the forwarding instructions where the control plane in that domain has a view and perspective of what's beyond, but it's still in the same tunnel. So I think the egress protection is more applicable onto egressing of a tunnel, not necessarily egressing of a domain.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, the terminology is not yeah, because egress node is a final destination. This is a border node. Yeah, just a border node is more precise. Yes, you're right.
Great, thanks.
The next page. So here is the extension to PCEs. First, we have need to have new capability. So this capability is for distributed binding information for protection. Basically, in the path setup type capability, we need to include a new PST type for distributed binding for protection. And then we may have a special TLV which contains the parameters. So if we have a PCE-CC, then we just define new bit, which is B bit. That B bit indicate the capability for distributing binding for protection. Next page. For distributed binding to the adjacent node, so because this is not a really binding, so we need to have indications to indicate that this is just for binding protection. So here we have extensions to RP and the SRP object. So in this object, we have a path setup TLV. So this TLV will contain a new PST type, which indicate that this is just for distributed binding for protection. In addition to that, because we also need the ID of that possible failed node, so we just have a TLV contain the ID of that possible failed node. So next page. I think that's all, and then we would like to have a comment from all of you.
Let me put myself in the queue. One comment as a contributor. Especially, I think I agree with a lot of things that Andrew mentioned. So I think we need to take at least the core of the work in Spring or in RTGWG, where we describe how this thing process needs to work. And there are various options as well. Like, should we only node IDs needed? Do we need destination? Do we need path? Do we need what we are protecting? What all the information that we need to exchange from a PCE or from IDR point of view, that we need a little bit more clarification on that. And then once we come to the extension, that work of course will belong in the PC working group. And even with the extension part, we can debate on what will be the best way to encode this information, but that is premature because we don't really know right now what all information it is. If it is just node ID, maybe what you have makes sense. But if we also put paths and all, so what you're currently the encoding by adding this TLV in RP may not make much sense. So I think let's postpone that discussion and first focus on at a higher level what all information that we need to pass to make this mirror binding work. John?
John Scudder. Actually, I think all I really want to say is +1. Please do the work once in a group that has the core expertise to get the architecture right, and then it'll be really easy to do the rest of it here after that's done. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, Emo. Next, next presenter is Giuseppe about IFIT, which was mentioned in the working group introduction.
Hello, everybody. This is an update about this draft that has been adopted just last IETF. So next slide. I'm Giuseppe. I'm presenting on behalf of the co-authors. So yeah, a few words about the background and motivation. So with IFIT, we denote the data plane on path telemetry, in particular in situ OM that is defined in the RFC 9197 and alternate marking that which the standard track documents are in RFC editor Q, the 8321 bis and 8889 bis. So let's say the data plane methodology are stable. So here we want to define the PSEP extension to distribute paths carrying IFIT information. So a PCC can indicate which IFIT features it supports, and the PCA can configure the specific behavior at the PCC. So the IFIT attributes can be generalized and include as TLV carried in the LSPA object. So next slide. So the draft defined two TLVs, basically the capability advertisement TLV and the attributes TLV. The capability TLV is an optional TLV in the open object for the capability advertisement of PSEP. So we define 5 flags according to the RFC 9197 and the alternate marking. In addition, we define also the attributes TLV that provide the configurable option for the features, for the IFIT feature. And it can be included as an optional TLV in the LSPA object, as I also mentioned before. And so the 5 sub TLVs that are defined are the 4 TLV for in situ IM and 1 for alternate marking. More details, of course, are within the draft. I missed here the details because we already presented last time. So next slide. Yeah, this is maybe the last slide. I just want to summarize the changes from the 0.0 version because we had some comments after the adoption and during the adoption. So we addressed this comment. Mainly we clarify that the head end needs support the IFIT capability, and it is supposed that at least 2 nodes on the path support the IFIT capability. We also clarify that the IFIT methods are more mature for SRv6 compared to SRMPLS. In fact, in the implementation of both in situ IM and alternate marking for MPLS are still under discussion. So there was a comment to remove all the references to this draft that are not stable. So we only keep the references for the SRv6 implementation that are the references are quite stable. For example, the application for alternate marking is again in RFC editor Q, and also the EOM extension for IPv6 is in ASG review. So we can say that these methodology are stable. Then we also clarify the relation with the IDR draft. You know that both PSEP and BGP can be used to instantiate SR policy. So it is reasonable to have the same mechanism for both PSEP and BGP. So we are also trying to keep the 2 drafts aligned. And we also clarify the methodology with regard to the framework. And then we had also added additional editorial comments. So next slide. Yeah, we found, let's say, this is a document relevant to enable both OM and alternate marking control mechanism. Of course, we always welcome questions and comments to improve the document and to keep aligned with other work. Thank you.
Any question from the group for Giuseppe? No. So Thank you, Giuseppe.
Okay.
Thanks for the follow-up. So the next presentation is for control identifier space by Han.
Yeah.
I've given. Okay, you should be able to.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Han Shi, and I'm going to talk about PCF controlled ID space, an extension to the PCE. Yeah, as we all know, we use PCE to allocate the SRMPS enable and the SRv6 seed, but this draft assumes the enable and ID range to be used by the PCE is known and set on both PCE peers. So our document specifies the extension to support the advertisement of the ID space to the PCE to control. Yeah, basically this draft is very simple. To delegating ID space, the ID space TLV is included in the open message, and each TLV corresponding to each ID type should be included only once in the open message. If it appears more times, only the first one will be used. And we define two kinds of ID control space TLV. The first one is for SRMPS enables, is called enable control space. And the second one is for SRv6 seed function ID space. It's called the function ID control space. Yeah, the first one is enable control space TLV. It contains the following fields. The first field is the number of the ID blocks, and the flags is 0, and followed by the various the enable range. And for the SRv6 function ID control space TLV, we also have the following structure. The first is the number of ID blocks, and the flags there is a 1 bit. It indicates if the locator field is included, and followed by the seed structure to describe the structure of the seed. The seed structure is shown in the left side. It's including the locator names, the function names, and argument names. And then we have a seed range. And if the L bit in the flag is set, the locator will include it. If the L bit is not set, that means the seed function range is applied to all locator. And basically that's it. Yeah. Some update from the NASA presentation. We expand the SRv6 pass ID to various function ID, and we add the seed structure to describe the seed, and we add the block field for better expansibility. Then add me as a new co-author. So we think the content is stable. So we are asking for the working group adoption of this draft.
The document is already in the working group adoption queue based on the past thing. Thanks for keeping it up to date. Is there any concerns from anyone on this document? Any comments? Chang, go ahead. Are you in the room?
Hello, Chang from Huawei. So thank you for the presentation. It's really clear. And as a co-author, I think you are right. The content is stable, so we should ask for working group adoption. And thank you for all guys for listening. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's move to the next one then.
Same presenter for the new one.
Yeah, same.
Somehow, why is the slide not changing? Let me do it. Just wait a second. And then I'll give you control. Share. And then let me pass control. Now you should be able to control.
Okay. So my second draft is about PCE initiating IP terminal. Yeah, basically the motivation is that in the SD1 use case, IP terminal is needed to traverse the WAN, and PCE can use as a control protocol to initiate this IP terminal. And this is also a simple draft. Basically, you need to advertise the IP terminal compatibility and to set up, maintain, and tear down the IP terminals initiated by the PCE. Since this is only the first draft, we do not include the terminal state synchronization and various timeout process, session failure process in this draft. Yeah, the PCE initiated terminal compatibility TLV designed as follows. Yeah, there is a 32-bit terminal type. If PCC can support this kind of terminal, 1 bit is set. We pick the most used terminal in the right table. And to manage the IP terminal, we designed the following message. The first one is the PC terminal initiate message to initiate or delete a terminal. PCE is sent to the PCC, and there is a flag to indicate if it's initiate or delete. And the second one is the PC terminal update message to modify the parameter of the terminal. It's also sent by the PCE to PCC. And the third one is the PC terminal report message. It's for the PCC to report the state of the terminal to the PCE. And those messages comprise the SRP object. It contains the ID to coordinate it between the initiate and the report, or the PC error message, and the RFNAG indicate its initialization or deletion. And the message also contains the terminal object. Yeah, for the terminal object, there is many sub-TLV. For the first one is the terminal ID TLV, contains the source address, destination address, terminal type, terminal ID. And the second one is the terminal name TLV. And the third one is a terminal parameter. It depends on the terminal type. We reuse the terminal parameter from the BGP terminal type. So it's basically the same format. And the terminal attribute TLV contains the metric or the TE metric. The metric is used as a kind of, the TE metric is used as the requirement, and the metric is used for the report. Yeah, since this is only the first, basically the first draft, we would like to solicit the feedback on this draft. For example, which type of terminal to support in this kind of IP terminal. We currently use this BGP terminal registry, but it's a first come first serve registry, or we can pick the most used. And do we need to add the terminal state synchronization in the future? Yeah, that's all. Any comments?
Andrew?
I guess the root question I have is why use PSUB for this if there's no path to compute?
You can think of the terminal as some kind of the path you traverse the one, because there will be multiple choice.
But I mean, like, couldn't you just use netconf to provision this, or just SNMP, or just any one of the flavors of mediation protocols?
Yeah, that's possible, but we can also use PCE to do that, right?
I guess I just see what is the benefit of using PSUB to do it compared to something just you can program anything with netconf, for example. So it just seems like a lot of defining to be done for just essentially at the end of the day, just basic configuration, because you're not doing make before break path calculations. You're not doing state tracking in order to react to those states information. So it just feels heavy to me.
Yeah, when you create a terminal, you can attach a T metric to request that you create a certain terminal corresponding to this T metric. That's kind of the use case. So
Okay, maybe I'll have to go back there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Ketan, go ahead. Oh, I think Ketan removed yourself from the queue. I think Robin.
Okay, Zhenbin from Huawei. In fact, this work had been proposed several years ago because, but later we found identify this the new use cases that use this the IP tunnel to transfer this the network. For example, in the SD-WAN use cases, because maybe that is needed to utilize this IP tunnel to traverse this underlying network, so that we need to initiate this IP tunnel by the controller. So we think use the PCE that is the has achieved this better scalability and performance. So we restart this work and comments will come. Okay.
Ketan, go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation. In the introduction section of the draft, the use case or what is mentioned there is that this tunnels help in addressing the label stack depth issue, MSD issue. I mean, it's different from what was presented today, and my question is, how does it help there, and is that really the use case?
Yeah, that's also another use case, but we think that C1 is more relevant now. Yeah.
Okay, so what I would suggest is if you could kind of put some more text to explain or justify those use case and how these things would help there. That would be helpful.
Okay.
I concur with what Andrew mentioned. So we need to probably help understand if this is really needed or a right way to go about it. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Zhenbin again from Huawei. Thanks for the Keaton's suggestion. In fact, we had this another draft is talk about this the application scenarios and framework of this tunnel segment. So later we send this in the mailing list for reference. So here that's we can discuss more about these possible use cases. Okay.
Any other comments? Let me add myself in the queue then. Thanks for your comment, but uh, I think the motivation is needed in the draft itself. We need to clearly specify why we need this functionality, and not just because why we need IP tunnels. That part is clear, basically, but why we need to use PCEP as the interface for that IP tunnel, and that we need clarity before we progress this. Then, when it comes to encoding, again we have to make a choice. Is do we want to go through new messages for this, or we have path setup type? We already allow path setup type to handle SRv6, which is sort of an IP tunnel in a way. So do we need a brand new set of messages to go, or should we use our existing machinery that already exists in PSAP if we want to continue with that work? But first thing is, like, I think we need consensus on whether we have enough motivation in this working group to do IP tunnel via PSEP. That would be my comment. But thank you for your work. Anybody else? This was our last presentation. Anybody else? Any other business? I think you should close.
Yeah. So we've reached the end of our PC agenda for today. So this is the end of the IETF week here in London. Thank you for attending, whether it is remotely or on-site, and hopefully see you in Yokohama. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Safe travel.
Thank you, Doof. Thank you, Chess.